Well, the thing is, like, no, I'm going to answer that seriously. The thing is with that, like, with all the phenomenon of the Beatles story, like, you know, the fact they made it and blah, blah, and everything, to top it off, you know, to top off the whole legend, one of the Beatles was assassinated. Like, you couldn't write this book. You couldn't write this. If you wrote this as fiction, no one would go, fuck. But it's like it really happened. And it's like, to top the whole thing off, one of the Beatles got assassinated. Just to, let's throw in another saga in the legend of the Beatles. Yeah, unbelievable.
And Paul was furious.
Yeah, no, he really would have wished it was him. Yeah.
No, I mean, it says in the Hunter Davis book, when he's written a sort of little bit more, and he said that he spoke to Paul and he said his main concern was the fact that everybody's going to be talking about John now.
Well, they did, didn't they? Well, they did.
Yeah, but he's ridden on the back of John's death as well. Of course he has. Here today and all that crap.
Yeah, well, you know, I can't comment on that. I mean, you know, they obviously were very good friends. I don't know what the happened in that, you know, really happened, what broke it.
But I think John Lennon's been the biggest winner out of it. He's still a legend, and like we've been looking back on his music, and it just doesn't measure up to McCartney's catalogue. And you could say, he's done much more albums, but look at what he did between 70 and 80, and look what Lennon did between 70 and 80. It's like Lennon was sort of doing the same song all the time. You know, there wasn't much scope. You know, it's like after the 65, he just sort of went kind of downhill, didn't he?
What was that guy's name, Ethan? The guy you interviewed from the the Whistle Show. What's his name again?
Oh, Bob Harris.
Whistle Test.
Yeah, that's the one. I saw a YouTube clip where he was interviewing John Lennon. Okay, and they're talking about stuff and blah 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 blah. And he was living in New York, right? And he's asking that, and and then the last question, he goes, right, I've got to ask you the inevitable question. And John goes, oh, here we go. When you're getting back together, when you're getting back. So he started talking about it, and he was just saying, well, one, we're not in the same place and doing the same thing, and blah blah blah. But if it happened, and blah da 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 da. But what he actually says in the interview, you can see it on YouTube. He goes, well, I've actually recorded with Ringo and George, and we've sorted things out. He actually says things are a little different for me and Paul. So it'd be really interesting what the rift really was between those two. Because he actually says it in the interview. He says it's a little bit different for me and Paul.
I don't think John would have left the Beatles. I think he was getting drugged up and he was saying, "Oh, off with all this." But I don't think because it was steady money for him. Why should he want to leave it? And then Paul just said, "Oh, it." In the end,
he did leave the Beatles.
Well, something happened
Paul
pretty quickly there, because in September of '69 they were talking about their next album. And within a month of that, John quit.
Yeah,
so there's something happened pretty quickly there, and I don't know if we'll ever know what it was. I think there was a lot of influences, and I have no doubt Yoko was one of those.
Yeah.
No, I wouldn't say, I'm not blaming her. I'm not saying she caused the breakup, but I think she had a significant role, and it was a combination of things. I think just kind of came to a head at that point.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, all three Beatles have made it quite clear. John quit. He walked into that meeting. He says, "I'm leaving the band."
Yeah.
So it's not just one. All three Beatles have said, no, John quit the band at this meeting. And we all sat there stone-faced. The other ingredient, Paul, was the one, obviously, that issue with Alan Klein. And when Paul wanted to bring in the Eastmans as the lawyers.
Yeah.
But as I said, it would have just been another part of the whole catalyst. There would have been all these issues, and then that as well, and it probably just came to a head, and Johnson went,
I think the thing that should have happened, and had there not been outside influences, that they just needed a break.
Yeah.
And I think if they'd have taken a couple of years away from each other, they would have continued on in some form. But we don't, we don't know, right? We weren't there.
Yeah. Well, that's right.
But I mean, here's the way I look at it. And again, it's just historical perspective. But you got bands like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. They've had bigger rows than the Beatles ever had, and they're still off and on.
That dog disagrees.
The Rolling Stones. I mean, those guys have been at each other's throats for years.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they're still doing it. They're still together. Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, they've had a lot of rows too. They're still together doing it. So at some point you have to sit back and say, does the good outweigh the bad kind of thing? And I think they just needed some time away. And they had already acknowledged that George was capable of writing really good material. And so they had already acknowledged that they were going to make room for that, on their albums.
I mean, one thing that a lot of people said, like when Lennon was assassinated, and I'm not going to say anything you haven't heard before, but the thing that used to come up now at the time, and you think, and one of the things people used to say, when we were having the conversation, like the sadness of what that man would have written,
Wow.
But the other side of the story, the story too is, right, if he was still alive, I wonder if Paul and would have got back together, especially if they, during the anthology.
I'll tell you what, definitely before that they would have been, because they would have been skint. I think by 1983, all of them would have been suffering that badly because Ringo was finished. He couldn't even get a record label. George was at the end of his contract, wasn't he? Yep. And
true.
And John, that album was going down the charts, wasn't it? And I don't think Paul would have continued. I don't think Tug of War would have been the success that it had have been if John hadn't died. And I think all those things put together, they definitely, because none of them said, "No, we'll never get back together."
Well, I think the other thing too is had Wings not been successful in the 70s, I think it would have happened sometime in the 70s.
Yeah.
But with the success of Wings, and Paul was riding that wave for a number of years.
But I don't think they would have done. I don't think they would have done anything but some kind of live gig.
I don't know. It's all speculation, but I could, I think had cooler heads prevailed, they would have done something like the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young thing, where, they got their own careers, and every once in a while they get together and do an album. And I think that's probably what we would have seen.
Well, in that interview I mentioned with the old Whistle guy, John actually said, he goes, if we do get together, he goes, he doubts they would do a live concert. He goes, if we do get together and we had something to say, it'd be a studio album together. Yeah. So he actually said he doubted very much that they would get together for a live performance. But the other side of it too is, and again, it's a pinch of salt, people say stuff, but George Harrison many times said, no way. There's no way.
He was very, initially he didn't seem too bad, but, as time wore on, he seemed to grow more bitter.
He did. I mean,
he was very irreverent about the Beatles as a whole, very irreverent, which I thought
he was.
I thought that was kind of inappropriate, because had it not for the Beatles, there wouldn't have been a George Harrison.
That's right.
I think it's safe to say that Lennon and McCartney could have had a career on their own. I don't think George Harrison would have had a career without the Beatles.
Well, that's proven, because we all know the fact, and from all the anecdotes with George Martin and that, when the Beatles came in, George wasn't writing songs.
No, he wasn't.
He wasn't doing it. He got influenced by those guys. I might try this. And he obviously had some talent to do it, right? Yeah. But he had no intention to ever be a songwriter at the start. So
didn't seem that way.
So it's But I do too. Like some of the times when I've heard George go off at the Beatles and stuff, I think, come on, man, like they really, like Yeah,
Yeah,
slow
you
down.
know, when his biography come out, and I wanted it at the time because 1979 I was really big on the Beatles, and I just read something and it said, oh, it's cost £150, which is a lot of money back then.
It was. It was expensive here too. Yeah.
You know, that's about 2 weeks' wages back then, and they said it weren't that good, and then they said he speaks about the Beatles in about 5 pages, 12 pages or something, and you think, well, hang on, this is why you're writing a book, because you were in the Beatles. Nobody gives a about your solo career. You know, and this is everybody talks about George Harrison as if he was like, you know, some kind of big force that was going to match up with it. He just had a bunch of songs left over from the Beatles that he couldn't get on the albums. Half of them were pretty drab anyway, and he just put them on one album, the third album of which was shit, and it would have just made a pretty good double album, and that was his career. I'm sorry to say
I'd
that.
say
No, I hear your
I
opinion.
think All Things Must Pass and Living in the Material World were his best stuff he did. But I agreed, like after that, he kind of, you know, like the stuff he was doing in the 70s, there were flashes, you know, but again, had he not been a former Beatle, who would have noticed, you know, like,
Yeah. Exactly. And the other side of it too is like, unlike Lennon and McCartney, he learnt to write. So the thing too is like, he was not a songwriter. Like I don't see George Harrison, you know, sitting down and you know, working the craft of songwriting. He wasn't that. Yeah, he pulled out some great songs and stuff. And as you say, All Things Must Pass. That's Beatles. That's all that stuff is left over from these Beatles stuff. Yeah. So that's why it's such a great album, you know, because he obviously it was a period where he got stuck into writing, and but after that, you can take a lot of that George Harrison music with a pinch of salt. Yeah, as you say, there's flashes, certain songs.
It took Jeff
but overall
out of his own.
Yeah. Sorry, what was that?
Jeff Lynne to realize what good he had in him.
Yeah.
No, Jeff Lynne was just desperate as well.
Well, I think we've already, you know, we acknowledged the world did a long time ago. The sum of the whole was greater than the sum of the parts. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think you can say the same thing about any one of them. I always found it interesting that in the initial couple of years after the breakup, it was Ringo who had the most success overall.
What?
He did, actually, yeah.
He did. He had some great singles out. His Ringo album was easily the best album of that time period to come out, you know, the stuff they were all doing.
Yeah, but remember they was doing a hell of a lot of Apple plug-in at the time for the albums and stuff. So, you know, he got for the quality of the albums that were coming from Ringo. I mean, he was getting a lot of publicity.
Well, but he was doing good stuff though. Like people knock the Sentimental Journey and the Boku Blues. If you listen to those albums, they are very well done. It's quality music. You might not like that style of music, but
but it's well done.
The artistic value of that stuff. It is good music.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm not a big fan of Sentimental Journey by any means, but Boku Blues I can put on anytime and listen to that. And I don't like country, but it's very well done. So you know, the stuff he was doing was pretty solid work. You know, he came out of the gate pretty strong. But you know, it's like I said, the sum of the whole was greater than the sum of the parts, and whatever chemistry the four of them had together, they weren't gonna come close to matching that on their own. They just weren't.
Right.
You know, they didn't have the pieces to do that.
But the only thing, out of the all four Beatles, let's say early on it split for whatever reason, you know, Paul McCartney would have gone and been somebody, because many a times, like even in the Hamburg days, people around them all said Paul's going to, because that was his drive. He wanted to be famous where the other guys just
He was
wanted
a
to be in the
showman.
band.
He was a
He was a showman.
You could see in all their concerts, he was the guy who was basically emceeing. He was the showman. And, you know, he also, of the four of them, he probably had the strongest business sense as well.
Yeah, and that's again, as you were saying about the Beatles' chemistry, because they were so different.
Yeah.
So you had all those elements, the showman, the fucking this, the that, and it just together it was a whole.
Yeah, this is where all this management stuff comes into it, because obviously he wanted to make a few shekels for himself by having Eastman on board, whereas you know, everybody moans about Klein all the time, and yet he was a fantastic manager, from far better than Epstein ever was.
Well,
in that first year that Klein was the manager, he did negotiate that serious royalty increase from Capitol Records and made the Beatles a lot of money.
He also introduced them to Phil Spector
but Ethan, Alan Klein might have got that increase. You should have a look at what percentage he was getting for getting that increase.
And he sold the rights. He sold the rights to publishing. Like, how stupid was that?
Yeah, I know.
You know, he basically gave away the next 50 years of income for those guys. You know, how stupid are you? You know, the Beatles catalog was gold, and Alan Klein decided the best thing to do was sell it. Like, seriously, sell it at $1970. Like,
and then it was up with Michael Jackson.
Well, he ended up with it eventually, but I mean, you know, that was an incredibly stupid move.
Sony owns. Doesn't Sony Music own it now?
Yeah, his record company owns it now, I believe.
Sony does, yeah.
Sorry, who does?
Sony.
Sony does. Oh,
yeah, or part of it or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was, you know, you look at that, and I think that was not a, you know, this was not just another band. You know, like there's something else there that he didn't see, and I think he was, you know, just looking for the short-term fix.
You know what interests me about that though, and I still think about it, unless you guys have got some insight into it. When Michael Jackson came along and he goes, "I'm going to buy your catalog," right? I still to this day don't understand how Paul McCartney didn't buy it. Like, the guy wasn't short of $1, right?
Yeah.
He just didn't think of it.
He's a cheap bastard, though.
I don't believe that. I think there's something else behind him not purchasing that catalog, because it's not like he didn't have the money or he couldn't have fucking borrowed it or whatever. It's Paul McCartney.
He wanted to go in with Yoko on the songs, but Yoko wouldn't do it.
I don't think she would have had enough money at the time.
Yeah, but I don't. Again, I don't get it. The guy was worth. He's worth billions now, but even then, he was hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah,
and you know, and being Paul McCartney, even if it was tied up, he could have borrowed it. It's Paul McCartney, you know.
There's a fantastic book. There's a fantastic book called "You Never Give Me Your Money," and it covers a lot of
that book. I've got that book. Yeah.
I think it talks, you know, at length about that whole Sony ATV, you know, Northern Songs sale.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, it does. But I don't know. I'm just surmising it. I don't know. But I just find that whole situation really, really strange. Like, the songs are coming up, and you're Paul McCartney with millions of dollars and the possibility of being able to borrow millions more, and you don't buy them. And the excuse you always gives, like, well, we wrote them for nothing. And I just thought, I get stuff, mate. That's a stupid thing to say.
He did try and sort out the freak circus that was hanging around the Beatles about 1968. And I remember he was trying to sack Aspinall, Taylor, Magic Alex, because they were all on the payroll, and they were sitting there eating like having a French chef serving them food in the Apple headquarters every day. You know, and these things to an accountant, you know, they might be the mate, but what are they doing for you? How are they helping you?
Yeah, well, I mean, but that's their own fault. You know, it's like any, you know, I've run businesses, and the thing is, it's like, you know,
I think they was just too stoned to know what was going on, and then they woke up.
That's what I'm saying. That's their own fault. You start a business and then just have nothing to do with. Well, what do you think's going to happen? What do you think's going to happen? You know, you've got to actually turn up and keep your eye on.
You got to remember. You got to remember.
You delegate stuff, but at the end of the day,
you got to remember these guys.
You have to run it.
You got to remember these guys were in their 20s, and you know how smart were you in your 20s? Right?
No, but that's what. Yeah, but what I'm saying is, they can't sit back and go, well, it was your business, you know. You know,
artistic types.
Yeah, exactly.
The Beatles made
people.
The Beatles
once
made
they had their big
their
holiday in 1966, they lost their discipline completely. They kind of shut Epstein out. He fell to pieces. They started doing what they wanted, turning up at the studio when they felt like it, taking the LSD, doing all this. And you've got to have discipline to keep a band going. I mean, I'll say that for the Stones, you know, no matter how many drugs they take, they've kept it together because they've known at the end of the day, they're getting paid lots of money because people want to see the Stones, not necessarily Mick Jagger or Keith Richards, but the Stones. And if
the Stones, yeah. Well,
but the Beatles made.
We found a topic.
Yes, I'm sure it would happen.
The Beatles were still smarter than most of their contemporaries, even in their stupid 20s, because the Stones ended up losing their entire 60s catalog. And a lot of those 60s groups didn't end up any better.
Didn't Klein have something to do with that too?
I'm not saying Klein was a good, guy.
Well, the good one is, whatever you say about Yoko, but like John said, he goes, I was broke, and Yoko came along, and because she is a business person, and she ended up investing in Jersey cows, right? Made millions of dollars. That's a business person.
Yeah, I remember when he died. I remember reading that they estimated his wealth at half $500 million. This is in 1980.
Yeah,
$500 million, and a lot of it was real estate. He had
real estate.
In real estate.
But that was Yoko who was doing it, not
John.
Yeah,
no John. It wouldn't have been him. But that was what he was estimated to be worth was $500 million. In 1980, that's one hell of a chunk of change. That today, in today's money, that would be worth more than Paul McCartney is currently worth.
Yeah, keep it tight. Yeah,
he's been estimated at 1.2 billion, I think. So
something like
that's a hell of a chunk of change.
Well, if you don't have any money coming in from records, diversify. And you'll go.
Well, you don't make that much from records. You got to sell a whole bunch to make money, right? The Beatles did.
Any though, the
Beatles did, but that's not going to sustain you for 50 years.
Yeah, and at that point, he was in his house husband role. So where was money going to come in? Well, we'll just start buying up cow farms and.
Yes, watch the film Telstar to see how badly wrong it can all go.
Yeah.
Just look at poor Hines. They found him with £5 in his pocket, dead.
Nah.
That was all he had.
Well,
this was a
tragic stories. And on that note, I'm so upset I'm going to go to bed.